Okay, good evening, everyone. It is 8:30, so we're going to call the meeting to order here. Good evening, everyone. My name's Brian, and I'm an alcoholic. Hey, Brian. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is a one-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, PA. The food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock, and the speaker comes on at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets right here every Saturday, 7 p.m. to 7:30. Feel free to show up and join us if you want to become a group member. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others can benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone that is new or visiting from out of town that would like to introduce themselves on a first-name basis so we can welcome them? Yeah.
Hi, Janine, alcoholic.
Janine.
Alex, alcoholic.
Alex. Welcome. Yeah.
Maurice, alcoholic.
Maurice. Welcome. Yeah. Scott. Welcome. Get everybody, okay? The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with a working knowledge of the 12 steps and that is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. So if you are new, those are your sponsors out there. Hang out after the meeting, hang with us. I always say, if you're coming in here, if you're new, you're struggling, grab somebody after the meeting. There's always a whole group of us. We'll help you get into the solution a little bit. Are there any announcements from the floor for the good of AA? Yeah, Maurice.
Maurice, alcoholic.
Maurice.
Wednesday night we meet in High Bridge. It's called the Broken Ashtray Group. That's High Bridge, New Jersey. All are welcome to join us. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Maurice. Anybody else have anything? Yeah.
Hi, Luna. Member of Alateen. I just want to offer, there is a Alateen meeting here for anyone under the age of 21 who have been affected by someone's drinking. We meet here on Mondays at 6 or 7, at 6 during the AA meeting. Mondays at 6.
Thank you very much. Okay, a couple of announcements from this group. We have a sister group, which is a big book study meeting that meets every Thursday at 7:30 right up the road here at Salem UCC Church, 186 East Court Street in Doylestown. The coffee's on at 6:15, so again, feel free to show up early and join us. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put their donations in the jar on the back table there, marked Big Book and CD donations. All CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, and our Facebook page. Subscribe and share. You can find the speakers from this meeting there. You can also find speakers from the meeting that we have on Monday in the room right next to here. It's a step discussion meeting. That starts at 6 o'clock. Also following that meeting, starting at 7:30, there is an Al-Anon meeting. And also this group has a running commitment Sunday nights up in Quakertown, an H&I commitment. So if you'd be interested in coming up there, you don't have to have any time requirement or anything like that. If you want to come up there and join us, see me after the meeting, see a home group member after the meeting. We always appreciate people trying to get into service. With that, I believe Nick's going to come up here. He's going to read our Just for Today prayer.
Good evening, my name is Nick, I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home. The Just for Today prayer of recovery. Just for today, I'll be agreeable. I will look as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anybody but myself. And now with that, I have Kara to come up and read the preamble.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kara. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Welcome home. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help others, alcoholics, to achieve sobriety. Now Brian will come back up. Tim will come up and do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim, and I am an alcoholic. How's everybody doing tonight? The 12 steps of recovery. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I'd like to bring Brian back up to introduce our speaker.
Okay, 7th tradition, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, we'll pass the basket, see that makes its way around. There's no dues or fees for AA membership, but we do have expenses. Your contributions help us to cover the cost of rent, big books, CDs, workshops, refreshments, so we do appreciate it. There's absolutely no smoking on the church property. It's the church's policy, not ours. We're very blessed to be able to have this facility, to hold this meeting in every week, and really they just ask that we keep the premise tidy. So just be considerate of that as you're coming and going from the meeting. Wait till you leave. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now to introduce our speaker for tonight, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, on loan to us from Stroudsburg. Please help me welcome Chris D.
I'm an alcoholic. My name is Chris. Hey, Chris. Just be clear, I'm from New York. That's going to get established real quick. But grew up in Queens, Rockaway Beach. And that's pretty much the whole qualification right there. I mean, if you know anything about Rockaway Beach, New York, I belong in Alcoholics Anonymous. They call it cirrhosis by the sea. So let's see. So I moved out to Stroudsburg, which is the Poconos area, and I moved out there a couple of years ago, like 2 years ago maybe? Yeah, I think actually coming up on 2 years right now. Moved out with the anticipation of, I was a New York City firefighter, and then I just recently retired from the job like 6 weeks ago. So then, made the move official, Are we recording this? That's not supposed to be just keep that to yourselves. So I bought a house. It was an investment property until I moved into it just recently. So the joys of recovery. My sober date is February 21st, 2007, and in that time frame, I want to go more recently. Why I bought the house in Stroudsburg was because when I was in New York, in Queens, I was in Astoria at the time. I was like, we can't be in this box, when COVID happened. And, just being in a 5th floor apartment, we had a 1-bedroom that we, converted a closet into a 2nd bedroom, and it was like, we got to get out of here. And so that just kind of led to the great quest of what am I going to do, family expanding, and my wife's mother lived up near Scranton in the Clark Summit area, and she had 14 acres. And so right in the middle of COVID, April, May of COVID, New York lockdown, hardcore, I was commuting 3 hours to work. And it was like Shangri-La to get out, and be on 14 acres and just breathe the air and feel free. And I was like, well, it was like an escape from New York. And so I'm happy to be in Pennsylvania now. I'm happy to have landed where I landed, and now that I've recently retired, I get to do, all sorts of great things. I had a business on the side for a couple of years, 5 or 6 years, and it's a cool thing just to kind of talk about some of the spiritual side of things. I'm not winning any awards for the best program in the room. It's progress, not perfection, all of that kind of stuff. I'll certainly talk about my experience with the 12 steps. In fact, that's probably brings me the most joy to share the experience that I've had in going through this process and how it's helped me and how it's helped me be able to help others. I was in this kind of business thing. It was 100-something business owners out in Park City, Utah last weekend. And we were doing some exercises, some writing exercises and whatever. And, one of the concepts, it's if you could solve one problem, and you're just looking at your personal life, professional life, what have you, what's one thing that you could solve that in solving it, you'd solve 100 other problems? Just one thing you got going on that if you solve that one thing, you'd solve 100 other problems. And so hearing a concept like that, it's oh, I already have experience with that. I know that this makes sense as a concept because when I did not drink alcohol anymore, it solved probably more than 100 other problems. In fact, it's transformed the entire trajectory of my life. There isn't every single thing that's good in my life today is a direct result of being in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's due to my sobriety, and my sobriety would not be, it would cease to exist without Alcoholics Anonymous and what I've gotten here. So, so now I'm just writing down some stuff, and they said, write down an impossible goal for 2023. And so, it's always funny how when you get pen and paper, and anybody that's ever written a 4th step, you probably know this, that you start writing and then you're just what the hell? It's a surprise to you what comes down on the paper. You weren't expecting that. And so I wrote down, an impossible, insane goal for 2023. Speak at an AA conference or something. And I was I don't want to do that. As soon as I wrote it, I make a phone call to someone because they said, well, you got to take an action to move in this direction. So I call my buddy Chris, and Chris says, yeah, we'll get you on the docket to speak this Wednesday. So this was last weekend, and then I'm speaking Wednesday, and then Ron texted me a day later, hey, can you come down to Doylestown and speak? And so I've probably spoken 3 times maybe in the last, 6 months or so, and then just boom, 2 speaking commitments in a week. As soon as I write down, it's well, it's time to get you going. If we're going to get this thing going before the end of 2023, you got to get some reps in, So here I am to share my story once again. Oftentimes I tell a story from, going through all the beginning stuff, and then you speak for, it's crazy that you get up here and it's I have 45 minutes to speak. you always say, like, all right, I just want to talk about the 12-step stuff. I don't want to like go into the story so much. And then 30 minutes have gone by and you are like, you haven't even hit bottom yet. So I want to try to avoid that. I'm going to do this on purpose, that I'm just going to take you right to, early sobriety. I should preface it by saying that my first meeting, I was 17 years old. And again, I grew up in Rockaway. So it's like really kind of a magical thing that I wound up in AA at 17. But it's not that big a surprise when you understand that both of my parents were in Alcoholics Anonymous. My mom, I think she's sober 48 years right now. My father passed away with 23 years. My brother's got to have 30 years. His wife 30. I have a sister who lives out here actually. She's got, probably over 20, maybe 25. So you didn't need a crystal ball to figure out where I was likely going to end up. That this was the path that I was on. And so my first drink, I was 15 years old, very late start by Rockaway standards, and then made my first meeting at 17. And to kind of sum that up, I mean, the fact that I had a sober mom who knows the signs, knows what to look for. I give her 100% of the credit of how it was I ended up at my first meeting. And she saw me come home Sunday morning at 11 o'clock in the morning, and she didn't do what any mom was well within her rights to do at Sunday morning at 11 a.m. when your son walks in at 17 years old. She doesn't flip. She doesn't scream at me. She doesn't ground me. She just takes one look at me walking in the door, and she says, "Would you like to go to a meeting with me?" And I said, "Okay." It's a wonderful thing, because otherwise, it's not like I would have just gone into a meeting on my own, without that request, And so she caught me right at that moment where I was really suffering in what had happened the night before. I'm feeling real down about myself, head looking, eyes looking at the floor, feeling real ashamed about whatever. She doesn't have any of those details. She just took a look at me and said the right thing at the right moment, and then that's how my, AA journey started. And so she took me to a meeting. It was an anniversary meeting. It was 3 women speakers, and one of the women I think I kind of knew from my mother's, friend circle. I have no idea what was said at all. I have no idea what was said. But what I do recall is being welcomed. I recall the camaraderie of it, the smiles, the handshakes, the hugs. And one of my prior basketball coaches was in the room. And I walk up to him and he pulls out a chair and he's just like, we had this one, we were saving this one for you, that old classic. And so anyway, I was all in. I mean, and I felt like, even though I don't remember anything that was said, I felt like this is where I belong. Like, this is what I was looking for. This is what I was looking for in a bottle, And then a week later, I was at a meeting with my mom in Brooklyn, and it was another anniversary. And so this is now at 7 days sober, and at the end of that meeting, I'm thinking about all right, where am I going to celebrate my year anniversary? I start planning my 1-year anniversary, thinking about who's going to speak, what group it's going to be at, all that stuff. And it pretty much happened that way. Like the group that I was thinking is where I celebrated, and I had mom and dad speak naturally, pretty easy. And what's cool about Alcoholics Anonymous, since since I'm here, I might as well say that was one of the most. It was like a room like this one, like really like this kind of big. But imagine, because it's, a young person in Rockaway celebrating an anniversary, that it was like there's 5 times as many people in this room as there are right now, right? Like the whole neighborhood showed up, and the table, they redesigned the entire room to they put the tables on 45-degree angles and got twice as many tables as they usually got in the room, and then they had chairs lining up the whole thing, and then 3 rows of people in the back. It was like an unbelievable experience to be a part of, to have a 1-year anniversary with that level of support. Now, being young gets old pretty quick. All of a sudden, it was kind of like okay, and now I did that. You know, like I made it to the year and I had all the commitments that AA offers, and you know, I finished up my chairperson commitment, and the novelty of me being this like sober 17-year-old just began to wear off. And it was kind of like, you know, like the adults in the room, when the meeting was over, the adults would like have conversations with the other adults, and like I was like, you know, I started to kind of feel that sense of like, oh, I'm not a part of kind of thing. All of this is very silly, of course. What was happening is that I was beginning to do less and less in Alcoholics Anonymous. It was almost like a conscious decision, although more like unconscious separation from what had been recommended up until that point. I started to just kind of pull away from all of the things that were working. And long ago, I kind of stopped having a sponsor. You know, the sponsor that I had, I really stopped talking to him probably when I had 6 months. And then I, you know, had a couple of forays with a couple of other sponsors, but as soon as they wanted me to do anything, I would just stop talking to them. And now, you know, I have a real bad case of like, I'm 18 years old. I'm 19 years old. I'm 20 years old. I am in Alcoholics Anonymous still. Now I'm at the point where the only thing I'm really doing is making meetings. And I'm entirely self-sufficient. There isn't a decision that I'm running by anyone. I'm not running anything by anybody, right? So when I was 19 and I'm in college and I just go, college is stupid, I just dropped everything. I did 2 semesters. I was at the end of my 3rd semester and I just walked into the registrar's office and I dropped 5 classes. I didn't even take the final or any, you know, I just said, nah, I'm not going to do well. So I just dropped those classes, and I tell my dad, I go, Dad, I would have just wrecked my GPA. And he's like, sounds good. It's like a good excuse, son, you know? Like that's, yeah, like it was sound reasoning. Like, nah, why wreck my, you know, 2.6 GPA from the 30 credits I had before? So anyway, and then I just dropped out of college, you know? I had a perfectly good Buick Oldsmobile that I was driving. Now I did have to hotwire it to get it started, and you know, this is like 2 years sober. My dad gave it to me, you know, so legitimately I had to hotwire the thing to get it started because it had like some old security system on it where you had to like do some weird, wild stuff, and I'm like, so like really I had to like bypass the security thing to get the thing to start, and but it was perfectly good. But another decision when I dropped out of college, I was like, I'm just going to do, you know, mortgage refinances full time. And so I was doing that in a neighborhood office like 10 blocks away from my house, and like right on the bay, and you know, so I'm making a bunch of money, not super duper amounts of money, but like, you know, again, I'm 19 years old. And so it's like, you know, I should get a Z28 red Camaro. And so I get rid of the Oldsmobile and I get a Z28 Camaro, and I get into a race with a crotch rocket on the Belt Parkway. And, you know, I thought he wanted to race. He might have just been going fast. I don't know. But I thought, you know, oh, he was challenging me. And so I get up to, 110, 120 miles an hour in this thing. 115, I think, was probably where the governor was set. And, you know, they don't do so great in the mist, you know, let alone, you know, like, so that the tail just kind of went out and then just like boom, 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 like off the center guardrail. I hit it 3 times, spinning out. And then, you know, just like, you know, like now, I remember if I'm 19 or 20 years old, but just like holding the steering wheel, like just like, I think we're okay here, you know? And then get out of the car, and then the motorcycle gang pulls up. What were you thinking? I don't know. And, you know, so the whole front of the Z28 Camaro is just off. You know, it's like hanging on by a piece of the fender. and then, come home and leave that thing in the driveway. By driveway, like the parking lot. And so nobody knows what happened. It's like in front of my best friend's house, and he's, thinks surely whoever was in that thing was killed. This is sober, guys. This is like sobriety. I got arrested, and my mom had to bail me out on Mother's Day. Sober. I don't even remember that was for driving with a suspended license. That's right. So driving with a suspended license, I started dating a girl who was like 2 years younger than me, from Alcoholics Anonymous. She had like 39 days sober. I think she said she was bipolar. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure what she said when she said it, but and then one of the last things was when the opportunity to DJ in a bar came up, I was like, that sounds like a good job, So I started DJing in the bar. And so this is what living life in self-sufficiency looks like. This is me making all of my own decisions unchecked by anyone. So no sponsor and no steps. At this point, what do my steps look like? Or what does my program look like? I have 3.5 years away from a drink, okay? But if my father would call me to see how he was doing, or how I was doing, inevitably the conversation would steer to, when was the last time you went to a meeting, Chris? And I'd have a tough time coming up with an answer. I would have no idea when the last meeting was. Or he would say something like, when was the last time you prayed? And then, of course, that I would lie. I'd say, well, I prayed this morning, or I just prayed a little while ago. But I wasn't praying at all. There was no praying. There was no connection with a higher power or anything like that. And so if I did wind up at a meeting, I almost certainly got there late, and I would always leave earlier. I would leave at the smoke break. Even though I didn't smoke, I would just get out and take off. The only kind of service, there was no commitment. The only time I would shake your hand is if you came up to me and shook my hand. There might have been a glimmer of hearing someone say something at a meeting and thinking to myself, like I should go up and say something to that guy. But I was leaving before the meeting was over, like I told you, so it's not like I'm going over and saying anything to anyone, Certainly there's no prayer, there's no meditation, there's no like me being self-reflective or any kind of self-examination. There's no me sitting down with a notebook and a pen, writing anything down, doing any kind of self-examination in that kind of way. The only time I would apologize to anyone for anything is if it would serve some good purpose for some self-centered reason. This would make me look good. I know how to play the game of being like, I really shouldn't have done that. I apologize. I'm sorry. But that was only if I had ulterior motives. It wasn't in a genuine, authentic kind of way. My life was entirely run by character defects. I'm entirely identified with my thoughts and my feelings and what's important to me. Selfish, self-centered, in the extreme, driven by fear that I don't even know I have, can't admit to anyway. Lying constantly, lying just because, One of the things I learned that I think is really great about getting into the fourth step later is that there's 3 kinds of lying, and I was in all 3 of them. It's just lie right to your face. I mean, that's blatant lying, right? Just not telling you the truth. The other thing is lies of omission. So I'm just leaving parts of the truth out of any story. And then lastly is the self-delusion. It's the lies that I believe, And I was just full of self-delusion. I wouldn't know about the self-delusion for over a decade, folks. But the self-delusion is a real fun thing to examine. And hopefully, if you get with your sponsors, for anybody, in case I don't come back to this, right? You get to your sponsors, and when you do the 4th step and you take a look at, well, where was I dishonest, right? Self-delusion is one of the most powerful things that's that stuff that's just going to be a surprise when you start writing it on paper. And I don't know any other way to discover it. I haven't found any other way to find out and figure out like just how delusional I was about a particular situation than to get a pen and a piece of paper and start writing and then be kind of in that prayerful place of writing the 4th step. And I'm saying, okay, God, please just help me set aside everything about, this particular individual, like it's not about them, like saying the fourth step prayer before I get into the fourth column, for anybody that's familiar, right? And if you're not, this is something you're going to get to when you work with your sponsor. And so I just set aside everything about the resentment, and then it's like, God, where was I lying to myself? And then magically, stuff just appears on the paper, right? But at this point in time, 3.5 years sober, I have no idea where I'm lying to myself. And all the various situations and problems that I'm causing, the chaos in my life, I mentioned getting arrested, all of that sort of stuff, that's just like, how did my license get suspended? It wasn't anything dramatic, folks. I got a ticket, a summons, and it was like, come down to the DMV and clear this thing up. And I went down to the DMV in Coney Island. I was 20 years old, making my own hours. I could just show up at the mortgage place and I could just make phone calls that I was that guy that's calling you at dinner time, right? But all I had to do was 2-3 hours a day. I could do it whenever I wanted, I could not even show up. And I was staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning playing video games. And I go to the DMV and I walk in, and this is Coney Island, Brooklyn, and I'm like, oh God, look at this line. I can't do this. I just turn around, I get in my car and I leave. So it's just pure, just irresponsibility, no accountability, I can't be put out, the entitlement, the arrogance. Then I get pulled over at a routine checkpoint and I go to jail. Because of that kind of stuff. So that's the character defects. That's what's driving the bus kind of thing, And so who am I relying on? Am I trusting and relying upon a higher power? Absolutely not. I am totally self-sufficient, relying on me and me alone. And then, eventually, I'm crazy enough to think that a drink is a good idea. And I'm barely making meetings, but this is the power of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's the power of the fellowship, it's the power of the meetings, because it would still be about almost a year before I actually drank. All of that stuff I just mentioned happened over that year period. And so just the little pops of meetings that I was going into here and there was still keeping this thing afloat, But then, eventually, I was at a meeting, and I'm sitting in the beginner circle, and it was a meeting where we had say a stage like this, twice the size. There's a circle up here. This is where the beginners meet, and I was sitting with them. And then there's a meeting out on the floor that's happening simultaneously. And during that meeting, I say to that circle of beginners, I'm going to drink tonight. And the guy that's leading the circle is, number one, he's a guy that he had a year sober. He's a guy that I helped, a couple of times along the way. He, struggled for a while, now he had a year. And so he's like, Chris, please don't do that. It was you've helped me so much. You've helped the guys in this circle. And he says, look out there. He points out to the people, and he's like, you've helped so many people out there, even just by being here, just by being being somebody that's a member that comes. You've helped so many people. Don't do it. But it was the switch was already flipped in my brain, I'm going. And so then the meeting's over, and I go to the bar, which is 2 blocks away, the bar that I DJ in, and I go to the back bar, it's closed, and I sit there, and the bar back is there, and so it's just me and the bar back. And I say, make me a drink. And, I remember what I say, I don't remember what drink it was, but it was it was awful. So I say, make me this drink, and he makes it. And then I'm afraid to take this first sip of this thing. because I just was in AA for 3.5 years and the drink is to die. I mean, or is the AA police going to show up? I mean, is the bar going to collapse if I take this drink? It's like all of this weight on the first drink, right? It's like, so there's a lot of concern here, and the drink is sitting in front of me. And then the thought that comes to mind is like, just take the stirrer straw. Just take the little stirrers, just take a little sippy sip right off the top of the ice cube. Just skim the top of the ice cube, that's it, just a little sippy sip. Okay, so I take the sippy straw, and I go to the top of the ice cube, and I just go, that's it. It hits the back of my throat, and immediately the thought was, got you now. Instantaneously, got you now. Might as well drink the whole thing. So then I take a good swig, and I'm like, this is awful. Let me get 3 Coronas, 3 shots, and boom, gone. Like 3.5 years didn't even happen, right? It wasn't until 3 days later when I was like hungover and beat up, and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, sun shining. I'm on the 4th floor of my, mom's apartment on the terrace, and like it was like the sun hitting me, and thinking like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? What have I done? Like I just threw away 3.5 years. And then I was like, I gotta get back. I gotta get back to AA. All right, what meeting? Okay, the meeting tonight? Okay, got it. That's where I'll go. And then it was 10 months before I ended up in rehab. I don't even know what happened that night. I had a plan to go to the meeting, but then 10 months went by, right? So we definitely have no idea what's going to happen after we pick up the first one, right? We have no idea what it's going to be. It's like magic that I ever wound up back in, in the rooms. And, everything that I just said was that was just the first time I relapsed. I have 6 relapses after that one, right? And so when I came back this time, I was hanging on for dear life. I had, I really didn't know if I was going to make it to the end of today. When I came back, when I had day 1, it was at the end of a 44-day run, straight, just drinking, drugging, 44 days straight. And by the end of that, not a lot of happiness receptors are firing in my brain. I am really beat up. I'm detoxing on my own. I was like 5 days into it. I'm living in Brooklyn at this time, in a place called Gravesend, Brooklyn, which is like, the armpit of Brooklyn. And I was in a basement apartment, and I'm sitting on the concrete steps. This is February now of 2007. I'm sitting on the concrete steps, smoking a Newport. Snow is gently falling onto the top of my head as I'm like leaning up against the concrete wall. This is 6 days sober, and I'm just like I'm not going to make it. And then I had this thought, which was like, maybe you missed something in We Agnostics. So I finish my cigarette, I go inside, I grab the big book, and I come to page 44, We Agnostics. It says, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. And if you want to hear the sound of the first step finally landing, I read that and I went, oh, that was it. I finally got the first step. I finally saw it. It's not like I didn't read that before. And I guess for my own personal story, of course, I needed to drink every drink that I drank to get to where I am today, right? Which is sober today. Like now I'm sober, and that's wonderful. But theoretically, it's not like the information wasn't here all along. And if so much of my life hadn't been about me being so self-sufficient and doing things my way and being so caught up in just like having to be the person that's in charge and knows what to do and will figure it out and isn't asking for help and isn't following suggestions. And every time I relapsed, I would come back into AA a little bit more willing to do the things that I was willing to do, but not all the way willing to do all of the things, right? It's easy to be willing to do the stuff that you're willing to do, but I was never willing to do the stuff I wasn't willing to do. So there was always some percentage of things that I was just like, yeah, that's not for me, that's for somebody else, that's for you, that's not for me, you know? And this is all very quiet and subtle. It doesn't sound as terrible in my head, you know? In fact, I'd be very polite about it. If you would make a suggestion, I'd be like, yeah. Sounds like a good idea, yeah. Maybe I'll try that. But it wasn't actual, you know, like I just wasn't going to do it. And so this is the importance of the first step. It wasn't until the first step landed on me that it really set me up for everything that was going to come. And of course, that paragraph, as it was explained to me, right, it's like the original writers of the big book, they have all these various different places in the book where they kind of summarize everything that they've said up to now, you know? And so this is a paragraph that is encompassing everything that you've read up to now, everything from the doctor's opinion on up through all of the chapters. We've read There Is a Solution, Bill's story, we've read more about alcoholism, and now here we are in Reagnostics, and it's just summing it up with two questions. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, check. How many mornings did I wake up saying, I am never going to do this again? I swear to God, I'm done. I can't live this way. After my relapse, day 3, like I said, all right, where's the meeting? I don't even know what happened that night, but I didn't go to a meeting. So the inability, when I honestly want to, we're not talking about promising mom or dad, we're not talking about promising your wife or your husband, we're not talking about looking at your kids and promising them and saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. In the quiet of your own mind, all by yourself, saying, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't live this way. And then getting drunk again, maybe that day. How many mornings did that happen? The number one answer I can already tell you, everybody in the room, is countless. How many people thought countless? Yeah, about half the room for the record. Anybody listening to this in the fourth dimension? It was half. Half the people here said countless. So if we honestly want to stop and we can't, it says, okay, there you go. Or if when drinking, you have little control of the amount you take. And I think for most of us, that's a pretty easy thing. I think that as far as Alcoholics Anonymous is concerned, in this day and age, that's really the thing that brings us all in. You know, and that was my understanding of alcoholism, of course. If I was to explain it to anyone at any time, I would be saying, oh, well, I can't drink. I don't have an off switch. You know, when I drink, it's like having sex with a gorilla. It's over when the gorilla says it's over. So, as much as I might want to stop, my feelings are irrelevant, right? And what separates me from the rest of the population, meaning like real, true non-alcoholics, right? Real, true non-alcoholics can, right in the middle of their 4th drink, decide to go home. So I don't care if they're getting drunk, right? Or they just, oh boy, I really shouldn't have had that second glass of wine. I just, even if they're, they get hammered or they set it up where they're, I worked in a firehouse, okay? I had 50 guys that I would go out to like a boys' night out with, right? Now I'm sober. I'm in the firehouse, but sober. When we go out to the thing, like we're going to Atlantic City, we got like the fantasy football draft, something like that. And I'm observing these guys. And on a spectrum, right? You can take a look. Everybody knows, if I were to take like a survey and say, okay, who are the 3 to 5 guys that you, if you had to be honest, like that you'd be concerned, like this guy needs help. And if I was to survey all 50 of those guys, they would come back with the same 3 to 5 names, right? But 90% of them are drinking to get drunk on this particular night, right? But there's like a higher end to, that crew. Like 10% of them, it's like these are the guys that you got to watch out for, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's like 5 guys that they're the guys that like they have a beer and they only had that one beer, for sure. It's like incredible to watch, right? Like they really legitimately only had that one, right? Here's the point. A couple of those guys that are in that mid-range, they might have a dependency on alcohol. They might drink too much. They're not alcoholics. Bottom line, they're not alcoholics because I've watched them be drunk, hammered, and be able to put down more alcohol than I ever could have drank. In like my heyday, these guys can drink. But, all right, I'm going up to the hotel room. I'll see you. I'm sober and I'm having a hard time leaving. Right? Like I'm having a tough time getting out of here. Just being at this thing, like we're in the club, like and they're, okay, see ya. And they can just shut it down. That's the difference, right? That if we're just keeping it about something very, very simple, as Silkworth describes in the doctor's opinion, the phenomenon of craving. What separates us from them is the phenomenon of craving. Now, the results, the actual what happens, like the circumstances of the night, if, there were some times, if I'm going to look back in my history, that maybe I didn't drink as much as I would have liked to, but it was circumstances like the bar is getting raided. But of course, if I'm looking back through my history, I'll go like, well, see, there you go. There was a time I only had 5 beers. It was like the police were coming after you. Huh. That's, again, why it's important. There's a self-delusion right there. That's an example, right? You get that stuff down on paper and you go, oh, I see that now, right? So being clear that as soon as I put any alcohol into my body, whatever, my body is now, alcoholism is in charge. And whether I want to or whether I don't want to, whether I need to stop, whatever, I'm not involved in the decision making. And so once I'm able to identify those 2 things, now it took me 4 years to get to the next sentence, I'll be honest, but it says, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And it took me 4 years to get around to the idea of like, oh, okay, I'm going to actually apply a spiritual solution here, What I can say is like just the greatest thing that ever happened to me was when I finally got into the big book with a sponsor who knew how to go through this thing, who knew how to like follow the directions, and was able to take me through it. Because then the greatest gift that I received is not only my own sobriety, but then that's a duplicatable process and that's something that I'm able to do with others, right? I mean, there's 2 things that, number one is, maybe why that intention came out of nowhere of, like you should speak, you should speak at the AA conference or whatever, is because speaking gives me a lift. Speaking is something that it enables me to do something to be of service, to say, if I can share a message and if I can be helpful to anybody in the room and that's going to benefit them in some way, it feeds my soul, right? And it makes me a better father. It makes me a better husband. It gives me more clarity and better perspective and more joy to go out into the world at a higher frequency to be of service out there and to do better. And it lets me, it buys me a couple of days, of sanity, probably, And so if I'm in service in that way, it does something for my soul. And so that's why when I was at the carnival with my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old and my wife at 5:30, over in Mount Pocono, it was like, I got to go get ready for the meeting. not even a question, that I'm coming here. It's an hour and a half away, you know? And so leave them at the carnival, they're having a good time, I'm going to speak at the meeting. This is what's incredible about that is there wasn't a single moment of like, that thing doesn't happen when I'm doing this, you know? When I'm aligned and connected. If you say like, oh, we got the Yankee game tonight, oh man, I gotta, and that's a fun thing. But still, I'd be like, geez, you know, just the travel, I'd be weighing it. You know what I'm saying? There'd be self-involved. This gives me an opportunity to get out of self in a way that just like shuts it down. It's like, Chris, can you come speak Doylestown? We haven't had you in a while. It's like, yeah. And then when actual, in real time at the carnival, it's not even a hesitation. It's not like a problem at all. Everything else in my life, it has something attached to it, right? But not this. And then the other great benefit is being able to take other people through the big book. And I've been able to do, you know, workshops through the big book, you know, with multiple people. And then be able to see the fruits of that is, you know, like what pays dividends is the ongoing sobriety of the people that you've worked with. And you just see them get better and better and better. And then working with other people, like just that is a tremendous gift that I didn't always have, you know. I'm so fortunate and so, you know, like lucky in a way, blessed, you know, like it just, you know, like you can really just get a tremendous amount of gratitude when you think that it really might have missed me. I really could have died on any of those relapses, you know, any of those times, and there was no guarantee I ever would have got back here, right? I mean, half a dozen relapses to come to the place where this is available, right? Like we've got a program of action that if you do it, it actually works. And to be the kind of person, obviously talking about myself here, right? To be the kind of person that would like go to the yoga class and not do the yoga with everyone. And just like watch them do yoga and like hang out with the yogis and like kind of get some, you know, getting some like, you know, little peripheral spirituality off them, you know what I mean? Like it's helping, but I'm not doing the stretches. And then to be so, like, to have the audacity to say on a relapse, yoga doesn't work. Having never done the stretches, you know, having just hung out with the yogis, yoga doesn't work. How about even just the audacity of, but 3.5 years, it kept me pretty good. Even in my half-ass efforts, it kept me pretty good, you know? And to be like, nah, it doesn't work. To then get to this place. I'm thinking of a story, and I guess I'll share it, and then I'll shut up. When I first came around 17 years old, there was a meeting called the We Group. They met Monday through Thursday at 11:30. So that's the kind of meeting that you would imagine. Monday through Thursday, 11:30 a.m., you know? The kind of crew that's there all the time. And, you know, there was a guy, his name was Sean, and he was counting days with me, but he had been around a bunch of different various times. And all of it, I'm thinking of this story because I'm basically going to make sure I make the tie-in now before I forget. The tie-in is the gratitude, you know, that maybe it could have missed me, you know, that the way that I was working Alcoholics Anonymous and being an Alcoholics Anonymous, it was like there was more to it than what I was getting or what I was applying or what I was seeing or whatever. And so I'm counting days with this guy, and he was the kind of guy that was like real shy, introverted. The only time he would share is if, you know, like we're in a circle and he's forced to, you know? And he would always, it would just be like some jumble, it was like wild, you know, like his shares, just like wild thoughts. Like he'd always say at least one or two things that just, I don't know how you connect those dots like that, you know, like it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, you know, he was a little bit ahead of me. He was probably like 2-3 months sober when I was just counting days. And so now he had 6 months sober, I had 3 months sober. I'm at the We Group one day, and he raised his hand at the We Group and he shared. And it was like, oh my God, this guy's making a lot of sense. Like he's in good shape. Like he was like eloquent and clear. Like all of us were like, whoa, what got into Sean? You know? And he was talking about how he was going to go home, like to, Boston or something like that, to visit his mother and all this. And so I just lose track of Sean for a while. And you kind of lose track of time sometimes in Alcoholics Anonymous. But now I have 6 months, and I see Sean again for the first time. And Sean is shaking like a leaf. And he's got that face tremble going that we see, like if a guy's trying to say anything, his whole face is trembling, and he's got burst blood vessels on his cheeks, and he's not doing good. So this is Thursday at the We Group, 11:30 in the morning. He's not even a day back. And then I'm talking to him outside, and I got him going a little bit, where I'm just like, you can do it, man. You got one day, you'll be fine, And it was almost like he started to believe me, like hope was starting to creep back in for him. And he was like, okay, well, what do I do? What am I supposed to do, Chris? And I look at him and I'm like, just meet me at the meeting tonight at 8. And the look in his eyes, it was like he was deflated, and almost like he was betrayed. Almost like his eyes communicated, like, not you too, man. Like, not you too. The only thing I had to offer him with my 6 months of sobriety and trying to figure things out on my own, as encouraging as rah-rah and you can do this and it's a day at a time and you got this. All I could tell him to do was go to another meeting. That wasn't going to be enough for that guy. He's been here. He's done that a lot. Monday morning, because he didn't show up at the Thursday meeting at 8 o'clock. End of the We Group, they say, can we dedicate the prayer to Sean? He drank himself to death this weekend. I was 17 years old, right? And this was a guy that I was really close and friends with, It was the first guy that died in Alcoholics Anonymous for me. And now, I have the benefit of, I have 16 years sober now, I have the benefit of a lot of hindsight and a lot of experience and all the relapsing experiences and all of it, to be able to look back at that moment to see that he needed more of a solution. That's really the moral there, he needed more of a solution. Now, of course, if somebody's in active alcoholism and they've never come to AA, step one is you got to get them to a meeting. But if you have somebody that's been in AA 25 times and they're not getting it, and they've never gotten into this book, what a tragedy. What a tragedy to be here now with the opportunity in front of you to never take another drink again in your entire life. And all it takes is for you to get into this book with a sponsor that can show you how to follow these directions and have it transform your entire life. What a tragedy it would be to miss that. And I'm so grateful that I didn't, and thank you all for listening.
Okay, again, I'm Brian. I'm an alcoholic. First and foremost, I want to thank Chris for coming here to our group tonight, delivering an incredible message, hope and recovery. Couple quick announcements here, and then we'll wrap things up. Again, the food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock, so feel free to show up early, enjoy the refreshments, the coffee that we put out. If you want to get involved with some service, again, with this group, even better, we appreciate it. There's always a meeting after the meeting. There'll be a group of us hanging out. If you want to get involved, help us out with cleaning up the meeting, we appreciate it. We're going to have to put the chairs away, the ones in the front here and the ones on the sides. The ones at those tables will stay where they are. It's customary for us to form a line and thank our speakers as they come here on their own time and expense to share a message with us. Just want to thank everybody for helping out tonight. Thank Ed in the back for taking care of the kitchen. Thank our greeters, our leaders, and thank our speaker one more time. And if you do care to join us, we have a nice way of closing. And we will close the meeting down with a brief moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic inside and outside of these rooms, followed by our Lord's Prayer. Our Father,